Keir Starmer just lost the political argument on energy costs. He doesn't realize it yet because costs don't make an impact overnight. But he's put millions of British households in a position they'll never forget. And he's handed his political opponents the most explosive issue of this decade. The UK is facing a new cost of living shock. After months of global tensions triggered by the war in Iran, energy prices have surged again, hitting households just as they thought the worst was behind them. Prices for gas, electricity, and even home heating oil have been climbing fast, and families across Britain are bracing for the bills to keep rising. Now, energy costs always fluctuate with the global market. But this time, the spike is happening not because of domestic policy mistakes, but because wholesale energy markets are distorted by geopolitical conflict. And that reality has a human face. Think of hundreds of thousands of households that rely on heating oil in rural Britain, where prices have shot up by as much as 80% in a single week. That's not inflation. That's crisis. In response, Sir Keir Starmer has held emergency talks with senior ministers, officials, and even the Governor of the Bank of England. He's promising action. He's pledging that his government will use every lever to ease the cost of living squeeze. But what kind of action? And is it enough? The strategy so far is targeted relief for the poorest households, not a universal bailout. That means tens of millions of pounds of support for those most in need, especially households that depend on heating oil, but not the broad support schemes we saw during the Ukraine energy crisis. Let's break that down, because this is where political memory truly begins. Imagine a retired couple in Derbyshire. They've lived in the same home for decades. Their energy usage isn't excessive, just normal daily life, keeping warm, lights on in the evenings, maybe boiling the kettle a few times a day. They're careful with their money, always have been. But this winter, their bill is $300 higher than last year, and for them, that's not a number. That's money that could have paid for groceries, for medicines, for necessary repairs to their home. And when they call their MP to ask, why is this happening? The answer isn't a bold solution. We're focusing on targeted help, which in reality means help only for a portion of those suffering. And that leaves millions behind. That's when support stops feeling like help and begins to feel like abandonment. Now consider younger families on fixed incomes, or working people in northern towns. Families who were already struggling before this spike. They hear that relief will be limited, that universal support is off the table, that the government can't afford to backstop everyone, and they feel the pinch not just in their bank accounts, but in their daily lives. And these are not isolated cases. Independent analysts warn that British households are paying higher energy costs than almost any other advanced economy. Prices have risen faster than wages, and many families are already in fuel poverty, meaning they spend more than 10% of their income just on energy bills. Starmer's government points to the price cap, which was lowered in April and will protect prices until June. But that cap is temporary, and when it lifts, bills could climb again, by hundreds more. Some projections show annual increases of 300 or more for the typical household. Here's the real political danger. Energy bills hit either everyone or they hit no one. Targeted support might help the poorest households, but the vast majority of pensioners, working families, and fixed-income earners are still left exposed. And when people feel personally squeezed, politics stops being abstract. It becomes personal memory. Let's take another example. In a town like Preston, you could have a grandmother living alone, managing on her pension. She turns on the heating in the early morning and again at night. She's not extravagant. But this year, her energy bill is $400 more than last winter. That's not a statistic to her. That's missed meals and skipped outings, and maybe even anxiety about her future. She doesn't see the complexities of global energy markets or fiscal constraints or price cap formulas. All she sees is how much money is coming out of her pocket. And she remembers that feeling when she votes. That's when political memory takes shape, and it doesn't fade. History shows us this isn't theoretical. Back in the early 1990s, the unpopular poll tax didn't spark riots forever. But when people paid it month after month, year after year, It reshaped British politics and ultimately forced a prime minister out. The memory of that tax lingered for years. Now energy bills are entering that same space, unavoidable, ongoing, and deeply felt. So what does this mean electorally? Let's talk about constituencies with high proportions of older voters, fixed income families, and communities where energy costs make up a large share of monthly budgets. These are exactly the kinds of seats that could swing in the next general election. You don't need polls to see this. You don't need fancy models. What matters to voters is this: did their bills go up? Did they feel abandoned? And who was in charge when it happened? And right now, the answer on both counts is not reassuring for Starmer. Opposition parties have already reacted. The Conservatives have slammed the government's cautious approach, arguing that it leaves too many households bearing the burden. Reform UK has seized the issue as a wedge to argue for VAT cuts and cutting levies from bills entirely. Even within public debate, experts are calling for big changes like a social tariff, a subsidized discounted rate for vulnerable households, because targeted help might not be enough if bills continue to surge. And here's the thing: policy responses that help only some households while leaving others exposed are politically riskier than universal responses, because those left behind feel the injustice more sharply. Now let's bring this home. Picture an 82-year-old pensioner in Scotland. She's on a fixed income. She has a small heating allowance. She saw her energy bill go up this winter by nearly £450. She remembers every one of those extra payments as a sacrifice: skipped meals, delayed heating, constant worry. In 2029, when it's time to vote again, will she remember who was Prime Minister when that happened? The answer is almost certainly yes. Political memory isn't built by headlines. It's built by repeated personal pain. The bill that arrives every month, the deliberate decision on what to cut from your budget, the anxiety that doesn't go away, and millions of households are living that reality right now. So here's what I want you to think about. First, are you or someone you know feeling the impact of rising energy bills? Tell me in the comments. What's the real story in your household? Secondly, do you think Starmer understands how deep this cost of living pain goes? Or is he still thinking in numbers instead of lived experience? Third, is there any path that could save his political standing on energy? Or has this issue already become permanent political memory? Share this video with every household in Britain that's worried about their bills, because this isn't just a passing crisis. It's shaping the political landscape years before the next election. And if you want to see how this story unfolds, from winter energy costs to electoral consequences, subscribe now. Thanks for watching. Energy bills aren't just numbers, they're memory. And by 2029, millions of voters will remember exactly how high they were.